Hello and welcome to First UCC's Bedtime Stories. I hope that you've been enjoying these readings from The King's Messenger by Carolyn, Clare Givens, narrated by Stephen Hesselman. And I hope that you go on Amazon and purchase this book if you have enjoyed it and if you can, on paperback or Kindle. And at the very least, maybe leave a review for this author who has been very gracious in letting us read this. So today we're on chapter 4. And before we get there, I just want to say that our church is taking this very seriously, and that for the remainder of the week, we're going to be seeking to work from home. Right now, I'm still in the church office, so while still being here, I wanted to kind of use my setup that I have here, but tomorrow might be a little bit different, depending on if I record it today or actually tomorrow. But here is chapter 4, The King's Messenger. This is a poem or an excerpt from Paradise Lost by John Milton. This is servitude, to serve the unwise or him who hath rebelled. Against his worthier as thine now serve thee, thyself not free, but to thyself enthralled. Reign thou in hell, thy kingdom let me serve. In heaven God ever blessed, and his divine behests obey, worthiest to be obeyed. Don't worry, I had trouble understanding that too. But, moving on. One day, as Smuggins stood along the side of the king's courtroom with the other messengers, the king looked up from his conversation with a knight dressed all in black. His wise eyes looked over the line of messengers and stopped for a moment on Coggins, one of the older messengers. Coggins had led the knight who had slain the evil dragon of Alinar. He had taken messages to the leaders of the army on the front lines during the war. If there was ever a dangerous task, the king knew that Coggins would be able to do it. "Coggins, step forth," the king called out. "At your service, your majesty," Coggins said, stepping forward. "Coggins, for many years you have served me well in the most dangerous of situations. But you and I are not as young as we once were, and this task is the most dangerous I've ever given to one of my messengers. I fear I cannot entrust it to you, for though your heart is more than willing, I want your service for the years to come. I'm going to call a younger messenger for this task, but I wanted to tell you first." "Yes, your majesty," Coggins said, and stepped back, his shoulders sagging slightly. Smuggins stood at attention, almost ready to leap forward. A dangerous task? It might be his! This would be a greater task than when he had taken a merchant to the great gold mines of the south so that he could purchase the precious metal. It could be that this was the difficult task in which he could really serve the king. The king's eyes looked over the line of messengers again before he called out, "Smuggins, step forth." There was a spring in his step as Smuggins said, "At your service, your majesty." "Smuggins, come close to us." Smuggins moved toward the dais and joined the king and the knight in quiet conversation. The king said, "You know that my friend has declared himself my enemy and leads a rebellion against me. I need you to go with this black knight deep into the heart of the rebels' territory. But this Black Knight is known to the enemy, and while his experience is needed to get close to him, you, Smuggins, will have to be the one to strike a crippling blow. This is a task that I dare not give to anyone but a messenger. Yet, I fear I have not given you the preparation you need to complete it. On your journey, you'll train with this good knight, and I will pray that you will be prepared. Are you ready to serve me in this way?" Smuggins bowed deeply. "Yes, your majesty." Smuggins and the Black Knight left the next day. It was a long and treacherous journey into the heart of the rebels' territory. They traveled by night and slept during the day, awaking at dusk for a brief meal and an hour of weapons practice. Each evening, Smuggins grew more adept with the sword and long dagger. The Black Knight did not speak much, but Smuggins learned that he had spent a year serving the king in the rebels' territory. What a task that would be, thought Smuggins. What a way to serve the king. But when he spoke his admiration aloud, the Black Knight replied, "I was only obeying the king." After more than a month of journeying, the Black Knight said to Smuggins one night, "From now on, you must go alone. I cannot get any closer to the rebels' encampment without endangering the whole mission." "I understand," said Smuggins. "Do you really, I wonder?" the knight said. "You will not be able to defeat the enemy of the king. Your task is only to deliver a crippling blow." "My task and my privilege," Smuggins replied. "He will fight hard against you, but all you need to do is strike true. When he is down, do not try to finish him off. The king has greater plans than that. When you've struck your blow, leave as quickly as you can." "The king has a greater plan?" Smuggins asked. "What?" The knight cut him off. "You will learn the king's plan when the time is right, Smuggins. Play only your role." "I will, good knight," Smuggins said, and he gathered his things together and continued on the journey. The next day, Smuggins approached the edge of the enemy's encampment. He crept as quietly as he could, but with an errant step he stumbled, falling into ivy and branches. At the noise he was surrounded. He looked at the circle of rebels and saw the enemy among them. Taking one look at Smuggins, the enemy smiled to the rebels with him. "You are no warrior," he sneered. "What does the king think he is doing?" Seeing the badge of a messenger on Smuggins' shoulder, he laughed aloud. "I remember you from the king's courtroom. Do you have a message for me from your king?" "I do," said Smuggins, and pulled his sword from its sheath. The rebels took a step forward and began to draw their weapons, but the enemy signaled them back with a wave of his hand. "Leave him to me," he said. The enemy pulled out his weapons as Smuggins removed his dagger from its sheath, and they began the two-handed combat that Smuggins had been taught. Very quickly, Smuggins saw that there was no way to defeat the enemy, but he took note of the weaknesses the Black Knight had pointed out to him, and began to press his advantage. Their swords and daggers met again and again in fierce struggle, clanging metal ringing out among the trees, and little by little Smuggins gained the upper hand. So gradually that the enemy barely noticed. Suddenly, Smuggins knew the time had come, and he stepped in to make his final blow. He struck with all his might, and the enemy staggered back under its weight and fell on one knee. There was a moment of silence, and all the rebels' eyes grew wide with terror. They had never seen their leader fall. Before they could react, Smuggins turned and ran, dodging through and around them back the way he had come. Some of the rebels tried to follow him, but out of the woods came men wearing the king's seal on their tunic, and as Smuggins continued on his way, he heard a great battle behind him. Smuggins returned to the Black Knight, and they traveled back the long journey to their land into the king's courtroom. When they returned, they learned the outcome of the battle. Smuggins had begun. The losses were heavy on both sides, but the rebellion's forces had been dealt a crippling blow. On his first day back in the line of messengers, Smuggins stood straight and tall, ready for whatever task the king might give him next. From his days, the king looked over the line of messengers, smiled at the eager look on Smuggins' face. He motioned for a page to bring the medal he had made for Smuggins to wear. "Smuggins, step forth," the king called out. "At your service, your majesty," Smuggins said, stepping forward. I have a gift for you, and thanks for your great service to me, the king said, and stepped down from his days to pin the medal on Smuggins's chest. When he finished, the courtroom erupted into applause. You may step back, Smuggins. Yes, your majesty. When the king had seated himself again, his brother, the royal prince, stepped forward from the crowd. A question, my lord, the royal prince said. Of course, my brother, the king responded. We celebrate today a joyous occasion. Your messenger Smuggins successfully completed the task you sent him to do. But what if things had gone wrong? What right did you have to send Smuggins into such danger? The courtroom was very quiet as the king considered his response. Finally, he spoke aloud. Smuggins, step forth. At your service, your majesty. Can you answer my brother's question? What right had I to send you on such a dangerous task? Smuggins looked at him, surprised. Why, every right, your majesty. You're the king. I am the messenger. At this, Coggins smiled, and the king's quick eye caught it. Coggins, step forth. Coggins did so, saying, At your service, your majesty. Do you have something to add to Smuggins's answer? You have had many years of experience in following my dangerous orders. Your majesty, your honored brother, the royal prince, seems to think that the task was about Smuggins's role. But as we all have seen, he was only one part of the whole plan. How things turned out was your responsibility, not Smuggins's. That is so, the king said. But my good brother, said the royal prince, you asked so much of your messenger. The king stepped down again from his daze and put his hands on Smuggins's shoulders. No, I did not, he said, looking into Smuggins's eyes. All I asked was that my messenger obey me. And that's the end of the reading for chapter 4. For chapter 5, tune in tomorrow.